called it a girls' weekend. I found the hotel receipt in our joint account on a Tuesday morning while she was still asleep upstairs. I remember standing in the kitchen in my socks, coffee going cold on the counter, staring at my laptop screen like it might change what I was looking at. The Whitmore Inn, Asheville, North Carolina. 2 nights, $286. Checked in on a Friday. Checked out on a Sunday. My wife had told me she was going to her college roommate's place in Columbus. Columbus is 400 miles from Asheville. I didn't say anything. I closed the laptop, poured out the coffee, and went to get dressed for work. That was the beginning. My name isn't important. What matters is that I spent 31 years building a life with a woman I thought I knew completely, and I found out I didn't know her at all. I was 58 years old, 2 years from retirement, and the floor had just dropped out from under me. Let me back up. My wife and I met in our late 20s at a conference in Indianapolis. I was in commercial real estate. She was in corporate HR for a mid-sized manufacturing firm. We were married within 2 years, had our daughter shortly after, and spent the next 3 decades doing what you do: paying the mortgage, raising a kid, building a retirement account, taking vacations, going to church on the Sundays when we remembered, fighting about small things and making up before bed. Normal life, good life, I thought. Our daughter is grown now, 30 years old, married, lives about 40 minutes away. We're close. She calls me on her lunch break sometimes just to talk. My wife runs the HR department for a regional medical group, has for 11 years, good salary, good benefits. She'd always been the organized one, the planner. I was the one who forgot anniversaries. She was the one who kept the household running. We had what I would have described right up until that Tuesday morning as a solid marriage. I started paying attention differently after I found that receipt. I didn't confront her right away. That's not my nature. I'm not a man who raises his voice. I never have been. I grew up watching my father lose his temper, and I made a decision early that I wasn't going to be that. So instead of yelling, I started watching and listening and quietly, methodically, looking at things I had never thought to look at before. Our finances were the first thing. We have 2 joint accounts, 1 checking, 1 savings, and we each have a personal account that we never really discussed. That was always the arrangement. Her money was her money. My money was my money. The joint accounts covered the household. It had worked fine for 30 years, so I never questioned it. But now I started looking at what was moving in and out. Over the previous 14 months, my wife had transferred a total of $63,000 out of our joint savings account. Small amounts, never more than $4,000 at a time. Always on a Friday. Always transferred to what showed up in the records only as an external account. $63,000. Our joint savings have been sitting at around $110,000, earmarked for retirement, for the lake house we'd talked about, for the years when neither of us would be working. I am not a dramatic man, but when I saw that number, I had to sit down on the floor, right there on the kitchen tile. I just sat there for a while. I didn't go to a lawyer first. I went to my brother-in-law, not her brother, mine. He's a CPA. I drove to his house on a Saturday morning, told my wife I was helping him with some yard work, and I sat at his kitchen table and showed him the statements. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "How long have you known about this?" 3 weeks, I said. He looked at me. "Does she know you know?" "No." He nodded slowly. "Okay, let's figure out where the money went." It took him 4 days. The external account the transfers went to was in my wife's name only, a personal savings account she'd opened at a different bank 18 months ago. From that account, the money had been moved in chunks to an LLC registered in the state of North Carolina. The LLC was called Beaumont Consulting Group. I had never heard of Beaumont Consulting Group, but when my brother-in-law pulled the registration records, there was a co-owner listed alongside the LLC's registered agent. His name was Scott. Scott was the VP of operations at the regional medical group where my wife worked. I had met him exactly 3 times, once at a company picnic 4 years ago, once at a holiday party 2 years ago, and once when I stopped by her office to drop off her forgotten laptop and he was standing in the hallway. Each time, My wife had introduced him as a colleague. Each time she had been perfectly calm, perfectly normal, not a flicker of anything. That name, Scott, hit me the way I imagine a car accident hits you, all at once, and then a strange stillness afterward. I went home that night and made dinner. Grilled chicken, roasted potatoes. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about whether we should repaint the back porch. She told me about something funny that happened in a meeting. I nodded and laughed in the right places. I don't know how I did it. I genuinely don't know. The next morning, I called the divorce attorney, a woman my brother-in-law had used years ago for a real estate dispute. She was sharp, direct, and she did not waste my time. When I told her what I had found, she was quiet for a moment, then said, "Is there any chance this is a legitimate business arrangement you simply weren't aware of?" I told her about the hotel in Asheville. She said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Over the following 3 weeks, I did everything she told me to do. I made copies of every financial statement I could access. I kept the log, dates, amounts, account numbers. I did not access accounts that weren't jointly mine. I did not install any software on my wife's devices. I did not follow her or have her followed. Everything I gathered legally, methodically, through channels my attorney cleared in advance. What we found was this. The Beaumont Consulting Group had received $109,000 over the course of 22 months. 63 of that came directly from our joint savings. The remaining 46 came from my wife's personal account, which she funded through her paycheck. The LLC had no clients, no invoices, no actual business activity of any kind. It existed, as far as anyone could tell, as a vehicle to pool money, my wife's money and Scott's money, for what the LLC's operating agreement described as joint investment opportunities. My attorney flagged this for a forensic accountant she worked with regularly. He reviewed everything within a week. His conclusion was that the structure, taken together with the pattern of transfers, was consistent with financial concealment, potentially in anticipation of divorce, potentially as an attempt to shelter assets. He used careful language, but the meaning was clear. My wife had been planning something. She had been planning it for almost 2 years. That thought, that while I was grilling chicken and talking about the back porch, she had been planning, is the thing that still sits in my chest like a stone when I let myself think about it. I want to be honest about something, because I think men my age are often expected to be stoic about this kind of thing, and I am tired of performing a calm I did not always feel. There were nights I couldn't sleep. I would lie there in the dark next to her, next to a woman I had shared a bed with for 3 decades, and I would stare at the ceiling and feel something I can only describe as grief. Not anger. Not yet. Just grief. The specific grief of realizing that the person you thought you were building a life with was building something else entirely, in parallel, the whole time. I thought about the year she had a difficult pregnancy, and I took 2 weeks off work without question. I thought about the years her parents were sick, and I drove them to appointments, managed their medications, sat in hospital waiting rooms. I thought about every joint decision we had made, every compromise, every negotiation, every time I had chosen us over myself. I wondered how long she had felt that this marriage was something to exit. I never asked her directly. That came later. The moment everything shifted was a Friday evening in March. My daughter had called me that afternoon. She had no idea what was going on. I hadn't told her anything yet. She just called to chat. And at one point, she mentioned that she and her husband were going to a fundraiser dinner that night, a hospital foundation event. "Dad," she said, laughing, "Mom's organization is one of the sponsors. I keep seeing the medical group logo on everything." I asked her which hotel. "The Hartwell," she said. "Downtown." My wife had told me she had a work event that evening. She'd shown me the invitation, actually. A printed card on the kitchen counter. She'd been thorough. I had no plan when I drove downtown. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't going there to confront anyone. I told myself I just needed to see. The Hartwell's lobby opens into a large reception area, and the main event space is visible through glass doors on the far side. I walked in, found a seat at the bar near the windows, and ordered a club soda. My wife was at a table near the center of the room. Scott was beside her. They weren't kissing. Nothing that obvious. But his hand was resting on her back, and she was leaning slightly toward him in a way that isn't how colleagues lean toward each other. And the look on her face, relaxed, open, comfortable, was a look I hadn't seen her give me in years. My daughter was there too, at a different table across the room, laughing with her husband's colleagues. She didn't see me. I was grateful for that. I ordered another club soda. I sat there for about 20 minutes. Then I took out my phone and I took a photograph. Clear, unambiguous. His hand on her back, her face turned toward him. I sent it to my wife's phone with a single line of text. Hope the meeting is going well. I watched her from across the room. She reached into her clutch for her phone. She looked at the screen, and I watched the color drain out of her face so completely that the woman at the next table actually leaned over and asked if she was all right. I left before she could find me. She called 4 times on my drive home. I didn't answer. When she walked through the front door 40 minutes later, I was sitting in the living room in the dark. Just sitting there, waiting. She turned on the light. She said my name. I said, "How long?" Not a question, just those 2 words. She stood in the doorway for a moment. She was still in her event clothes, still dressed for the evening she'd told me she was having. "How long have you been lying to me?" I asked. She cried. I had expected that. What I hadn't expected was how it didn't move me the way it once would have. There was a part of me that understood in that moment that something had already ended, and the crying was just the sound of her realizing it too. She said it had started 2 years ago, that it wasn't planned, that she had tried to end it. The usual things people say. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I said, "I know about the Beaumont account." The silence that followed was different, heavier. "I know about the transfers," I said. "All of them. I know about the LLC. I know what it was for." She sat down. "My attorney has a full accounting," I said. "The forensic accountant has been through it. We have everything." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see. Not guilt, not desperation. Something that looked almost like relief, like she'd been carrying something very heavy for a long time, and some part of her was glad to set it down. I don't know what to do with that. I slept in the guest room that night, and every night after that until I found the apartment. I filed 2 weeks later. My attorney was as thorough as she'd promised, because the transfers from our joint savings had been made without my knowledge or consent, and because the money had flowed into a structure that a forensic accountant had characterized as consistent with asset concealment. We had a strong position. My wife's attorney, and she did get one quickly, was smart enough to know it. The negotiations were unpleasant. They were also efficient. Within 4 months, we had a settlement. I won't go into every detail. What I'll say is that I was made whole on the joint savings. The Beaumont LLC was dissolved as a condition of settlement. Any claim she might have had to a portion of my pension was reduced accordingly. My attorney was very good. As for Scott, his wife had already known something was wrong. I found that out through my daughter, who heard it through her husband, who works in the same general professional circles. Apparently, the signs had been there for more than a year. They filed for divorce around the same time we did. He did not lose his job at the medical group. I'll admit I had hoped differently, but his professional reputation in this particular community is not what it was. These things have a way of circulating. I told my daughter about 3 weeks before I filed. I drove to her house on a Sunday afternoon, and I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she used to do homework in high school, and I told her everything. All of it. The account, the LLC, the photograph. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, how long have you been carrying this by yourself?" I told her about 4 months. She got up, came around the table, and hugged me. She's 30 years old, and she hugged me the way she used to when she was 7. I won't pretend I didn't need it. She has maintained a relationship with her mother. That's her right. I never asked her to choose. My daughter is a good woman, and I am proud of her, and I will not put her in the middle of something she didn't cause. What I will tell you is that the months since the divorce was finalized have been stranger than I expected. Not bad, just strange. I live in a two-bedroom apartment now, which is more space than I need and less space than I'm used to. I've been cooking again. Really cooking, not just grilling on a Sunday. I've been taking long walks in the morning because I can't sleep past 5 anyway, and I found that walking clears my head in a way nothing else does. I'm still in commercial real estate. 2 more years until I can retire comfortably, and I'm starting to think about what that actually looks like now that the plans have changed. The lake house is probably not happening. Something else is. I just don't know what yet. My brother-in-law checks in on me. My daughter calls on her lunch break. A friend from work invited me fishing last month, and I went, and we didn't talk about any of this. We just fished, and that was exactly what I needed. I am not angry. That surprises me, honestly. I thought I would be angrier than this. What I feel instead is something quieter, a kind of clarity maybe. The way the air feels after a storm, clean and very still and a little bit unfamiliar. I trusted completely, I built honestly, and when it fell apart, I handled it the way my attorney told me to, the way my brother-in-law helped me to, the way my daughter reminded me was possible, with my head up, without making a scene. That photograph, that single image sent with 5 words, was the only moment I let myself have. Everything after that was paperwork and patience. I am 58 years old. I have 2 more years of work, and then a horizon I haven't quite shaped yet. There is a version of what comes next that I haven't seen yet, and for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me. I just wanted someone to know the story, the whole thing, because sometimes these things happen to ordinary people leading ordinary lives, and it doesn't look like the movies. It looks like a hotel receipt on a Tuesday morning, and a man sitting very quietly on a kitchen floor, deciding what to do next. I keep coming back to the kitchen floor. That's the image that stays with me, not the photograph I took, not the conversation in the dark living room, not the morning I signed the papers. Just me, sitting on the tile in my socks, staring at a number on a laptop screen, understanding that the life I thought I had was not the life that was actually happening. There's something clarifying about a moment like that. Not pleasant, but clarifying. I've thought a lot about what made it possible for her to do what she did for as long as she did it, and I think part of the answer is that I trusted without verifying, not because I was naive. I'd spent 30 years in commercial real estate. I'm not a man who takes people at their word in a boardroom, but at home, I had a different operating assumption. I assumed that the people who loved you were operating in good faith. I assumed that what I saw was what was there. That assumption cost me $63,000, and, more than that, 3 decades of a shared story I had to revise from the beginning. What I didn't do, and I want to be clear about this because I think it matters, was let it make me into someone I didn't recognize. I've seen men come apart in situations like this, rage, retaliation, burning things down just to feel like they had some power back. I understand the impulse. There were moments, especially in those first weeks, when I felt something hot and ugly moving through me that I had to actively choose not to act on. I chose patience instead, not because I'm a saint, because I'd seen enough of life by then to understand that the way you handle the worst moments is what you actually are, not the worst moments themselves, how you move through them. My brother-in-law sat with me at his kitchen table and helped me find the truth. My daughter hugged me the way she did when she was 7. My attorney kept me focused on what was legal, what was provable, what was mine. None of that would have been available to me if I had walked into that hotel ballroom and made a scene. The people who help you find your footing after a fall, they show up for you when you've kept your head. That's the part I wish someone had told me when I was younger. That intelligence isn't just knowing things. It's knowing when not to act. It's reading a situation clearly enough to understand that the photograph I sent with 5 words was worth more than any confrontation I could have staged, because it was true, because it was calm, because it let her understand in a single quiet moment that I already knew. And then comes the long work of getting back up. That's not dramatic. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. It looks like cooking dinner in a 2-bedroom apartment. It looks like a long walk at 5 in the morning because you can't sleep. It looks like going fishing with a friend and not talking about any of it, just sitting by the water and finding that enough. I am 58 years old, and I am starting over in ways I did not choose and could not have predicted. But I am starting over with my integrity intact, with my daughter's trust, with my own reflection in the mirror, looking like someone I respect. That's not nothing. After everything, that is not nothing at all.